When they're designing their marketing strategies, businesses are ultimately trying to persuade consumers to buy as much of their products as they can. And so in doing this, they're going to be really interested in consumers' demand for their products. And what we mean by this is the quantity of a product that consumers are willing and able to purchase at any given price. And the willing and able part is really important. We need both of those things. We need consumers to want to buy a product, and we need that to be backed up by the ability to afford it. They need to have the money to be able to actually pay for it. And there are a huge range of different factors that are going to affect how this quantity demanded at each price might change. So you've got the price of other related goods. And if the price of a substitute good was to increase, then we say that's going to increase demand for the other good. So if the price of Samsung phones were to go up, then you'd see an increase in demand for iPhones, the competitor, the substitute product, because they would then look more attractive in comparison. But if you had that same price increase, then the demand for Samsung chargers and other accessories would likely go down, because these would be complementary goods. And with a complement, you see an increase in price, and that would decrease demand for the other good. We've got also consumer incomes, and with the vast majority of cases, if consumer incomes were to increase, then we'd see an increase in demand. And if this happens to any degree, then we call the goods normal goods. And luxury goods are the ones which are particularly responsive to these rising incomes. So maybe nice cars or holidays abroad. But we do have some goods, and we call them inferior goods, where you get an increase in income and that actually leads to a decrease in demand. And so that might be cheaper staycations or supermarket own brand meals we might see as being inferior goods. And then we have changing fashions, tastes and preferences. That's a bit more of an unpredictable one, and it can lead to increases or decreases in demand. So demand might just increase or decrease as things come into or go out of fashion. We did say that the goal of businesses is to try and increase demand for their products. So you would hope that advertising and branding, successful campaigns along these lines, businesses would hope is going to have a positive impact and increase demand for their products. Changing demographics, so we're talking there about the size and structure of the population, will clearly have a really big impact. First and foremost, if population is to increase, clearly that's going to mean more demand for products and services. And perhaps in a slightly more subtle way, if you have a change to the structure of the population, so for example, maybe an aging population, there's going to be demand for different types of products to one with large numbers of younger consumers. External factors can have really unpredictable impacts, so possibly really big PR issues, changes in laws, economic shocks. They're going to have a big impact on demand, really unpredictable ways, generally quite negative ways. And then many businesses experience really cyclical demand throughout the year. So changes in seasonal factors are going to have an impact on demand as well. Hotels and pubs would see a big rise in demand around Christmas, travel agents more likely during the summer holidays. Now, out of all of the different possible factors to affect demand, we've left price until last because it is actually the central factor which determines the quantity of a product that will be demanded. And that makes it different to the other ones because it sits on one of the axes when we actually plot the diagram showing what's called the demand curve. So price goes on the y-axis of this diagram, quantity goes onto the x-axis, and then we have the demand curve, which shows how much will be demanded at each individual price. And what we find is that an increase in price means that fewer consumers will be willing and able to buy a product. And so we get this downward sloping demand curve. As price increases, we see a decrease in the quantity demanded, whereas as price decreases, we see an increase in the quantity demanded along that downward sloping demand curve. If we were to have a change in any of those other factors affecting demand, then the whole demand curve would shift. if there was anything to cause an increase in demand, that would shift the curve further to the right because there would be a higher demand at each individual price. Whereas if we were to have anything to decrease demand, then that would shift the demand curve to the left because that would cause a decrease in demand at each individual price.